His stomach was a bottomless pit that could never be filled. Knowing this, his parents opened a crematorium specifically because of an unwritten rule: monster carcasses always leave behind some residue. Decades ago, the world was suddenly invaded by countless monsters. Humanity paid a bloody price to learn that drinking monster blood and consuming their cores could make them stronger. However, anyone who dared to eat the remaining meat, whether raw or cooked, would invariably end up dead. But since thousands of monsters are slain every year, their bodies would become sources of pollution if not handled quickly, leading to the birth of monster crematoriums. As Ryan grew older, the residual blood became insufficient to sustain him. One day, while moving a carcass with his father, he was so hungry he couldn't take it anymore, asking if he could just take one bite of the meat. His father, Marcus, nearly fainted from anger, shouting that he'd told Ryan 1,000 times that monster meat is inedible and threatening to break his legs if he tried it. Ryan sighed, thinking of how good that meat looked and wondering why he couldn't just eat it to stop the hunger. Marcus pointed to the large characters on the incinerator wall, making sure Ryan read them clearly. Monster meat is not for consumption. Eating it would turn one's eyes red and transform them into a monster. Marcus told him to stick to the blood if he was hungry, then left Ryan to handle the remaining carcasses while he went to check on dinner. To be honest, Marcus was reaching the end of his patience. Left alone, Ryan looked at the carcasses and couldn't help but swallow hard. Just as he prepared to toss a monster into the furnace, a sudden heat radiated from his waist. A moment later, a palm-sized booklet he had tucked in his pocket flew out into the air. It was a little trinket he had picked up for a friend at a secondhand market, usually just stuffed away and forgotten. We see the book hover as it reveals a description of the meat. The texture is tough, the taste is bland, and it is generally a waste of effort. However, it suggested that if simmered slowly with 50 grams of cooking wine and 200 grams of dried mushrooms, it could slightly increase strength and satisfy hunger. The final note was blunt: even a dog wouldn't eat this. Ryan couldn't help but shout in disbelief. He wondered if the heavens had finally taken pity on his starving belly and granted him a golden finger, a literal monster cookbook. But he had to wonder, was this thing for real, or would it be his final meal? That doubt lasted only a few seconds before being swept away by a wave of intense hunger. After all, he figured his fate was already decided by the heavens. Just then, his mother called out, telling him that she and his father had to leave for a while. She explained that their elderly relative next door was passing away. In a moment of lightheaded hunger, Ryan blurted out that the timing was perfect and it was a good death. Naturally, the air in the room froze instantly as his mother's face darkened. Realizing his blunder, Ryan quickly tried to explain, asking how the old man could go so early at only 80 years old, calling it a premature end. His mother, Sarah, gave a cold snort, clearly not buying his nonsense, but she didn't press the matter further. She told him to stay home, follow the procedures if anyone brought in a monster, and mentioned she had already called his school to excuse him. Ryan nodded obediently. To be perfectly honest, he had no desire to go back to that school anyway. He couldn't learn the cultivation techniques they taught, and in his current state of starvation, even moving felt like a violation of his survival instincts. Once his parents were gone, he immediately set to work cooking an iron-tail eagle, simmering it for half an hour. When it was finally done, he picked up a mushroom soaked in the savory broth and popped it into his mouth. Instantly, a familiar warmth surged through his body, feeling remarkably similar to the sensation of drinking monster blood. It was delicious. He realized he had been living a miserable life until this moment. As he was reflecting on his past, his stomach growled loudly, and a sudden surge of energy rushed through his limbs. Ryan had always possessed a spirit-resistant constitution, meaning energy usually just passed through him. Because of this, cultivation had always been impossible. He never imagined that eating a single iron-tail eagle would allow him to finally awaken his internal energy. At that moment, a golden light appeared before his eyes again, showing the eagle's stats. He had gained the iron-tail eagle's innate talent, along with a bonus energy circulation map. Following the guide, Ryan began to move the flow of energy within his body, focusing it all into his hand as he looked at a pebble on the table. He swung his right hand down with a sharp force. With a crisp sound, 5 deep finger marks were carved into the hard stone. It seemed our protagonist's life was about to become much more interesting. He realized his fingers didn't feel a hint of pain, and he nodded with deep satisfaction. This monster talent was essentially a cheat code. While others had to consume rare cores, he just had to eat. He quickly pulled out his school's cultivation manual, combining it with the energy map to guide his breath. In just 15 minutes, he broke through to the first rank of cultivation. He then eyed the remaining carcasses. He promised himself he would enjoy them tomorrow. The next morning, a frantic knocking at the door woke him. A neighbor, Mr. Miller, arrived dragging several carcasses of 8th-rank moon-howling dogs, looking for Ryan's father. Seeing Marcus wasn't there, Mr. Miller doubted Ryan could handle it and prepared to leave for another crematorium. Not wanting his meal to escape, Ryan grabbed his arm, assuring him he could handle the process perfectly. He explained his parents wouldn't be back for a while, but he had years of experience and knew the routine by heart. Mr. Miller finally relaxed, mentioning that the city had become dangerous lately with high-rank monsters appearing. There were even rumors of spirit realm monsters, suggesting a spatial rift had opened nearby. He warned Ryan to be careful alone and reminded him the pollution limit was 3 days. Ryan nodded, promising to handle everything. Once Mr. Miller left, Ryan hurried toward the moon-howling dogs. At that moment, the mysterious book flipped open again. It described the meat as average, but noted it could slightly increase strength and satisfy hunger. More importantly, it would enhance his sense of smell, allowing him to detect the strength of nearby monsters. The book's final note remained blunt. Even a dog wouldn't eat this. Ryan couldn't help but laugh at the book's attitude. Over the next 7 days, he finished off the remaining iron-tail eagles and moon-howling dogs. His internal energy surged, breaking through to the 7th rank, and his eagle claw talent grew significantly more powerful. Where he once only left scratches on pebbles, he could now pierce stone as easily as tofu. His strength already far exceeded that of an ordinary high schooler. Then, at midnight, he heard a strange noise outside. Using his enhanced sense of smell, he detected a 5th-rank monster lurking at the door. Remembering Mr. Miller's warning about the spatial rift, he threw the door open, decided to test his new strength on this intruder. We see a 6-foot-tall rat with glowing red eyes staring back at him. Ryan didn't flinch. Instead, he simply beckoned the creature forward with a taunting gesture, inviting it to try its luck. He slammed his hand into the rat's back with a sickening thud, his fingers carving 5 deep holes straight through its spine. He stood over the carcass, noting that such a lowly pest was no match for him. The book reappeared, identifying it as a ground-burrowing rat, but warning that the meat was of terrible quality and inedible. It seemed not every monster was a delicacy. He tossed the body into the furnace to see if a core would remain. After all, those cores could be sold for a decent price. He reasoned that the strength of the monsters coming through a rift indicated its danger level. Since these were only mid-rank, he felt he could handle the source. He had heard stories of people finding high-level treasures in low-level rifts and becoming overnight successes. It was better than winning the lottery. Driven by curiosity, he decided to track the rat's residual scent. Less than a kilometer from his home, he discovered a shimmering silver spatial rift. Upon entering, he found the path split in two. Using his moon-howling dog sense of smell, he determined the right path was safe. 5 minutes later, a temple called Thousand Buddha Mountain appeared before him. It was a strange sight. He had expected monsters, not a sanctuary. As he stood puzzled, a young monk approached him calmly. The monk, named Zen, greeted him and said the abbot invited him inside. Ryan politely responded that he was just passing through, wondering how the abbot could have possibly known he was coming. Zen explained that the mountain was surrounded by a formation that alerted the abbot the moment Ryan entered. He gestured for Ryan to follow, but as the monk smiled, Ryan noticed bits of meat stuck in his teeth. We notice a thick, metallic scent of blood in the air. This temple is clearly not what it seems. If they can maintain such a complex formation, they shouldn't be troubled by low-level monsters, yet here we are. The meat stuck in Zen's teeth raises a far more disturbing question. Where exactly did it come from? Ryan decided to push forward anyway, following Zen into a quiet meditation room to see where this path led. Zen explained that the abbot considered him an honored guest and had prepared a hot bowl of wild chicken soup. But as Ryan looked down at the bowl, he froze. Those weren't chicken pieces, they were iron-tail eagle meat. He wondered how long these monks had been consuming monster flesh. Without his unique digestive talent, they were surely turning into monsters themselves. At this rate, the entire temple would soon become a living purgatory. Realizing Zen and the abbot likely possessed formidable strength, Ryan felt he might have been a bit too reckless. When Zen noticed his hesitation and asked if the food was unappealing, Ryan quickly improvised a clever excuse. He claimed that as monks, they surely couldn't cook meat properly, and offered to show off his own secret family recipe in private. Zen hesitated for a moment, but eventually agreed, allowing Ryan to handle the preparation himself. Over the next 3 days, Ryan used the kitchen to safely process the eagle meat Zen provided, turning a trap into a feast. His cultivation soared to the spirit realm, and he even unlocked a powerful new eagle eye ability. He felt his power reaching the very limits of this hidden space, giving him the confidence to face whatever the monks were planning. Meanwhile, in the abbot's private quarters, Zen was kneeling on the floor in a cold sweat. Zen reported that despite eating the monster meat every day, the boy showed absolutely no signs of corruption. The abbot suddenly lunged forward, grabbing Zen by the throat and accusing him of lying about the boy's condition. Zen begged for mercy, swearing his report was true, which led the abbot to decide he would handle the boy personally from now on. The next morning, Zen returned with a fake smile and a simple bowl of vegetarian food. He claimed the wild chickens were running low, prompting Ryan to act disappointed while subtly mentioning it was time for him to head home. He didn't want to overstay his welcome, or so he told the nervous monk. Zen immediately tried to stop him, asking if the temple's hospitality had been lacking in some way. Ryan shook his head, remarking that this place was a peaceful paradise compared to the monster-infested world outside. Seizing the opportunity, Zen suggested that Ryan stay permanently and even offered him access to the temple's secret library to learn their ancient arts. It was an offer that seemed almost too good to be true, and it usually is. Driven by the promise of secret techniques, Ryan entered the library, only to be greeted by a strange, heavy fragrance. To be honest, the scent was far too sweet for a dusty room full of old scrolls. His curiosity led him to a hidden passage where he discovered a crystal coffin containing the body of a mysterious woman. As he stared at the red mark beneath her eye, a chilling, bone-deep voice echoed from within the coffin. The voice commanded him to wipe away the golden seal on the glass, and before he could resist, his body moved on its own. The moment his fingers touched the seal, the world went black, and he collapsed into unconsciousness. When he finally opened his eyes, he found himself back in his guest room, sitting cross-legged as he tried to steady his internal energy. A sudden knock at the door revealed Zen standing there with a white-bearded old man. This was the abbot, who claimed that after days of chicken soup, Ryan's body still looked weak and needed special medicinal pills. He insisted that Ryan swallow the pills immediately to restore his vital essence. Ryan looked at the pills and nearly laughed. It seemed the old monk was simply trying a more direct method of poisoning him. They were certainly persistent. We have to give them that much credit. What they didn't know was that Ryan was a master of refinement techniques that could neutralize any monster corruption at the source. He calmly swallowed the pills, already beginning the process of turning their poison into his own power. In an instant, the mystical book in his mind flipped open, revealing that the iron-tail eagle core contained a trace of demon blood capable of strengthening his hands and eyes. To be honest, the evaluation was quite harsh, calling the trace better than nothing as Ryan swallowed the pill. Seeing Ryan remain completely unfazed after taking the medicine, the abbot, Jacob, screamed in fury, calling him a freak and ordering his men to capture him alive. He promised a reward of life-extending soup to anyone who could take him down, and suddenly, a dozen bald monks swarmed from every corner of the temple. Their eyes glowed with a sinister red light, a clear sign of long-term corruption from consuming monster flesh. Zen was the first to strike, swinging a heavy wooden staff with lethal intent, but Ryan simply activated his power claw skill and caught the weapon with his bare hand. Zen froze in disbelief, unable to comprehend how Ryan had become so powerful. Ryan let out a cold laugh, thanking them for the daily eagle meat before his hand tightened with explosive force, driving his fingers straight into Zen's skull as the other monks rushed forward. Moving like a blur, Ryan unleashed his power claw again and again. In less than 30 seconds, the shouts and screams in the courtyard fell silent, leaving only a field of corpses. He walked slowly toward Jacob, noting that the old man clearly couldn't fight himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent these useless followers to do his dirty work. Ryan offered a trade, his life for the way out of this place. Jacob burst into a fit of manic laughter, admitting that while Ryan wasn't corrupted, he was still trapped. He mocked Ryan, asking if he really thought he could leave after Jacob himself had been stuck here for years. Ryan looked at him, confused, only for Jacob to explain that the Thousand Buddha Mountains' Great Protective Array was active, a barrier that allowed entry but forbade escape. Jacob told him to get comfortable, as he had plenty of patience to study Ryan's unique body. When Ryan asked where the rats and eagles he'd been eating came from, Jacob snorted, claiming the temple raised them, which, naturally, only led to more questions. Ryan wondered how Jacob had avoided mutating after eating so many monsters. Jacob's face twisted into a boastful grin as he revealed the temple's dark secret. They mixed the flesh of their youngest disciples with the monster meat to create a stabilizing soup. A single spoonful a day was all it took to keep the corruption at bay. This place once housed over 3,000 monks, but now, only a handful remained. The rest had been served for dinner. It's a grim realization, to say the very least. The news made Ryan's stomach churn with pure disgust. He pointed out that since all the disciples were now dead, Jacob had no way to make more medicine. Ryan, however, wasn't afraid of the monster meat, suggesting they see who could outlast the other. Jacob countered that the bodies of his fallen disciples would sustain him for another decade. But he had a better idea. If he ate Ryan, he might inherit a body that was naturally immune to the corruption. Hearing this, Ryan couldn't help but curse the old man's audacity. He told Jacob that if he wanted a taste, he'd have to earn it. Thinking quickly, Ryan dashed into the room and grabbed a lighter from the table, aiming it at the curtains. He asked Jacob how many days he'd last if his supplies were turned to ash. Jacob roared in a panic, warning him not to dare. The sudden shout actually startled Ryan, causing the lighter to slip from his hand. Flames immediately licked up the fabric, spreading rapidly toward the wooden beams of the ceiling. Jacob screamed that Ryan was seeking death, but Ryan just threw his hands up in a mock gesture of innocence. He blamed the old monk, claiming that if Jacob hadn't yelled so loudly, his hand wouldn't have slipped. A classic case of cause and effect, really. Driven to total rage, Jacob lunged forward with a withered hand aimed at Ryan's throat. Ryan stepped aside with ease and retaliated by grabbing Jacob's arm. With a sickening tear, the skin ripped away, revealing something far from human underneath. Beneath the skin lay a grotesque limb covered in the talons of an iron-tail eagle. Ryan recoiled, asking if the old man was running some kind of biological experiment. Jacob turned his head slowly, claiming that to defeat monsters, one must first become one. He boasted that this arm had slain countless eagles, calling it Ryan's good fortune to witness its power. Ryan snapped back, wanting nothing to do with such a blessing, before sliding behind Jacob to strike at his one remaining normal arm. He followed the punch with a brutal, crushing blow to Jacob's left leg. A sharp crack echoed through the room as the bone snapped cleanly under the force of the impact. Before the old man could even scream, Ryan struck again. His fingers, sharp as blades, drove deep into Jacob's skull. Standing over the fallen abbot with his hands on his hips, Ryan let out a triumphant laugh. He really was quite something when he put his mind to it. Ryan looked down at the defeated abbot, mocking the old man's former arrogance, and noting that while Jacob was fast, speed was still Ryan's own weakness. He told himself he needed to acquire a speed-related skill soon, even as the entire temple behind him was swallowed by a raging inferno. He turned and walked away, bidding farewell to the cursed Thousand Buddha Mountain as he retraced his steps, only to find that the monsters surrounding the area had vanished overnight. It was strange, certainly, but in this era of anomalies, he didn't dwell on it until he finally found the spatial crack. With a quick dash, he leaped through the rift and returned home, where he found a message from his father saying they would return tomorrow. After a long, restful night, he woke up early to wash, only to notice a peculiar red mole had suddenly appeared on his left wrist. He found it quite strange, wondering when it had grown there, as he'd only heard of such marks appearing on people with much more scandalous social lives than his. Then it clicked. He remembered seeing an identical mark under the eye of that mysterious woman in red back in the library. He wondered if there was a connection, but before he could investigate further, the front door clicked open. Ryan ran out to greet his parents, Marcus and Sarah, telling them just how much he had missed them during their time away. Marcus looked his son up and down with a look of pure surprise, noting that Ryan looked incredibly healthy and energetic lately. Fearing they wouldn't understand his recent dietary choices, Ryan quickly changed the subject, claiming he hadn't noticed any change at all. Since they were back, he decided it was time to head to school, as he had missed far too many classes already. He arrived just in time for the weekly combat training, where his teacher, Mr. Wu, immediately spotted him and called him forward to test his progress. The other students began to whisper, mocking Ryan's spiritless constitution and claiming he was destined to be a commoner forever. They joked that instead of cultivation, he should probably be studying the culinary arts just to keep himself fed. Ryan ignored the taunts, calmly swinging his arm as a surge of blood energy gathered at his fingertips and shot toward the testing stone 10 meters away. With a dull thud, the value on the stone's display instantly jumped to 2,000, silencing the crowd. The onlookers gasped in disbelief, as Ryan's power was now 3 times higher than an average spirit realm cultivator. Mr. Wu shouted for everyone to be quiet and prepare for their own training, but he pulled Ryan aside with a very serious expression. He demanded a reasonable explanation for this sudden growth, and Ryan, choosing his words carefully, told a bit of a tall tale. He claimed their family crematorium had received the carcass of a beast king, and after drinking its essence, he felt a warm current transform his body. Mr. Wu clearly didn't buy the story, but he chose not to press the matter further, noting that being able to cultivate was a blessing regardless. He told Ryan that with his current strength, he was finally qualified for advanced academy studies. The kindling competition was about to begin, and if Ryan could make it into the top 16, he would earn his academy entrance qualification. Mr. Wu advised him to prepare well, as the stakes were higher than ever due to the increasing frequency of monster rifts. These cracks in space were appearing everywhere, hiding unknown dangers, but also providing the catalyst for the kindling competition. It was a trial by fire, designed to find those capable of protecting their world from the encroaching darkness. The competition would be fierce, filled with geniuses from every major faction, and Ryan knew his current strength might not be enough to secure a top spot. He realized he needed to find higher-grade monster cores quickly, so he spent the next few days in total seclusion. He focused entirely on consuming monster essence to boost his cultivation, but while he was enjoying a choice cut of eagle meat, the food suddenly vanished into thin air. A message flickered in his mind about the heaven-devouring realm, a space where items could be safely stored. He was stunned by his own luck, realizing that with this secret realm, he would never have to hide his stash of monster meat again. However, he wasn't quite sure how to enter it until he accidentally brushed against the red mole on his wrist. In the blink of an eye, his surroundings shifted, and when he opened his eyes, he found himself back at Thousand Buddha Mountain. It was the ruined, burnt-out version of the temple, and he realized the red mark was actually the key to this private dimension. Seeing the charred remains of his new property, Ryan felt a sudden urge to kick himself for his earlier pyrotechnics. If he had known this place was going to be his own personal estate, he certainly wouldn't have set it on fire. He spent his days there following the recipes and dining on the finest cuts of irontail eagle meat. Under this nourishment, his energy reached the peak of the initial stage, and his power claw skill reached perfection, a true milestone in any warrior's journey. Reaching perfection in a skill is the equivalent of becoming a grandmaster, where the power gap between levels is vast. Take our hero's power claw, for instance. It can now manifest as a phantom blood-red palm for long-range kills. Time passed quickly, and soon the day of the kindling competition arrived, with the first test set before a deep spatial rift. As Ryan arrived, a disdainful voice called out from behind, mocking the coincidence of their meeting. He turned to see his rival, Julian, approaching with an arrogant stride. Ryan dryly asked if Julian had bought his way into the competition, which caused the young master's face to darken instantly with rage. Julian snapped back that a former loser had no right to speak, promising to show Ryan the true meaning of a power gap. Ryan simply chuckled, advising Julian not to talk too big, lest he embarrass himself when it counts. The proctor stepped forward to announce the rules. Each student would be given a motorcycle to hunt monsters alone for one day. Their scores would be determined by the trophies they collected as proof of their kills. The proctor warned that there were no weak monsters here, so anyone afraid should leave now. With that brief explanation, he departed, leaving the stunned geniuses behind as Ryan revved his engine and sped into the rift. We see Ryan tracking a pack of about 10 Gale wolves, following their scent with focused intensity. Gale wolves are rare in the outside world, and it would be a waste not to taste their meat. However, the competition area was covered in cameras, and Ryan couldn't risk exposing his secret of consuming monsters for power. After thinking for a moment, he picked up a stone and hurled it into the bushes, drawing out a 3-meter-long wolf with a piercing howl. Instead of fighting in the open, he charged directly into the thick brush. The commotion alerted the rest of the pack, and dark shadows began to emerge, fixating on him with predatory eyes. Ryan gave them a mocking come-hither gesture, and the enraged wolves lunged at him in a frenzy. He slammed the throttle, accelerating while using his keen sense of smell to locate more scattered wolves. Before long, he had a massive pack of 50 wolves chasing him toward a camera-blind spot outside the main zone. Once he reached the blind spot, he slowed down, letting the pack close the distance. As the lead wolf leaped at him, he touched the red mole on his wrist and whispered, "Come here, little one," as it vanished into thin air. The sudden disappearance left the nearby wolves dazed, and Ryan seized the chance to pull the first 6 into his heaven-devouring realm. The remaining wolves were already exhausted from the long chase. He stopped the bike and launched a counterattack, crushing the skulls of the remaining wolves with his bare hands. After clearing the battlefield, he slipped into his private dimension to process the fresh wolf meat. The guide noted the meat was tough, but the bones could make a broth to increase energy concentration. While the meat was hard to swallow, it offered a 30% boost to physical speed if one was hungry enough to try. The guide's tone remained as arrogant as ever, but it was still better than being told the food was unfit for dogs. As night fell and the danger tripled, Ryan stayed hidden in his realm, enjoying a quiet feast. Meanwhile, the other contestants weren't having such a pleasant time. We see Julian, looking exhausted and feral, struggling for 10 full minutes just to take down a single Gale wolf and claim its right ear. Before he could catch his breath, 5 more wolves emerged from the brush, causing the young master to panic. He managed to slay 4 more by burning through his energy, but eventually, he was forced to retreat in disgrace. He spent the entire night shivering in a tree, finally limping out of the rift the next morning with numb feet. Ryan couldn't help but laugh at Julian's disheveled appearance, asking why the great young master looked so worn out. Julian ignored him and submitted his trophies to the proctors, who quickly tallied the final results. Ryan secured 4th place with 40 wolf ears, while Julian barely managed to squeeze into the top 16 at the very bottom. Just as everyone assumed the assessment was over, the proctor announced that while the others could go home, the true test for the top 16 was only just beginning. Strategic projections suggested a massive monster tide would soon strike the 3rd realm. To give our young geniuses a fighting chance, the committee provided each with a monster core. This core could help them break through to the next rank, but the room erupted in whispers. Swallowing a core of unknown grade is a gamble, as no one knew what the side effects might be. It was a cold choice between future potential and immediate survival, so most decided to keep the core as a last resort. Soon, they were transported by black-winged eagles to the defensive front lines. The ground here was littered with the bones of monsters. Their mission was simple: reach the finish line safely and join a combat squad, all while being monitored by a mandatory tracking device. This tracker meant Ryan couldn't easily slip away for private business. After walking a few hundred paces, his keen nose picked up the scent of a dozen moon-howling dogs nearby. Remembering how much he enjoyed his last meal of their kin, he leaped into a tree and hurled his long blade, decapitating 3 of the beasts instantly. The rest charged him in a frenzy. The pack unleashed their secondary skill, spitting glowing energy discs at him. Ryan dodged with fluid grace, watching as the trees behind him were pulverized, before finishing the pack off 5 minutes later. Just as he prepared to collect the carcasses, another 50 dogs lunged from the shadows. Ryan turned and bolted, much to the amusement of the proctors watching from the safety of the command center. They mocked him for looking like a drowned rat after his earlier bravado. However, as the lead dog lunged at his back, Ryan blocked the camera with his arm and pulled the beast into his secret realm. He spent the next few miles fleeing while strategically snatching up any dog that got too close. Before long, the massive pack had been thinned out to a mere handful of survivors. Suddenly, a dog with reddish fur let out a piercing howl. Ryan had noticed this one earlier. Its aura was far stronger than the others, marking it as a high-level pack leader he couldn't yet defeat. He scrambled up a tree to catch his breath, only to realize he was completely lost in unfamiliar territory. He cursed the persistent dogs for chasing him so far off the mapped path. A world-shaking roar suddenly echoed from the distance. Looking toward the sound, Ryan saw 5 elite warriors in black uniforms engaged in a fierce battle with a 10-meter-tall behemoth. The beast's power was at the king tier, but the humans were no slouches either. Led by a king tier master and 4 experts, they coordinated their movements to lock the monster in place. They unleashed a barrage of wind and lava, the intense heat scorching the surrounding forest to a crisp. Yet, the king-tier beast was incredibly agile, dodging the elemental onslaught with ease. The lead man shouted a command, and the team synchronized their final strike to bring the creature down. Once the job was done, the warriors vanished as quickly as they had appeared. Sensing the lingering aura of a king-tier predator, the remaining moon-howling dogs finally fled in terror. Ryan climbed down and hurried to the massive carcass, touching his wrist to pull the king-tier beast into his realm. After checking his map, he quickly set off toward the original finish line. He had delayed far too long and risked disqualification if he didn't find his squad soon. But as he neared the boundary, a sudden hail of bullets came screaming toward him from the brush. We see Ryan dive behind a massive tree as a series of arrogant shouts echo from the distance. Peering out cautiously, he spots 3 figures in squad uniforms lying in wait ahead. It quickly dawns on him that this squad is the final hurdle of the assessment. He faces a choice: charge through the hail of bullets or surrender, though running away would be easy enough. However, since the clues for the second round are held by these 3, Ryan simply sneers at the idea of quitting. He gathers his strength and lunges toward another giant tree for cover. He successfully reaches the base of their high ground, using a powerful grip to hook the ledge and swing himself upward. But before he can strike, the 3 men quickly drop and surrender. Amused by their sudden cowardice, Ryan gives each of them a sharp, stinging slap before departing. From them, he secures the next set of instructions, a map quite different from the last. This map marks a specific rendezvous point where he is meant to meet other candidates, though only one of them can proceed. By midnight, he finally locates a specially marked house. To his surprise, he finds Julian there, currently struggling against 3 high-level monsters. Ryan climbs a nearby tree to enjoy the show, mocking Julian for looking so helpless after his earlier arrogance. Julian glares back, telling Ryan not to get ahead of himself and promising a duel once the monsters are dealt with. But just then, an ear-splitting roar shatters the air. A massive, 8-meter-tall black-red eagle begins circling above. Ryan's keen senses tell him this beast is at the evolved rank, a threat far beyond the intended scope of this assessment. Julian frantically tries to call the proctors, wondering if they've lost their minds with this difficulty spike. Ryan realizes this is another hidden test and leaps down to stand beside him. He tells Julian to stop shouting, as the proctors clearly won't help. Ryan decides to swallow his monster core right then and there, betting that a breakthrough will give them the edge they need. As he swallows the core, a surge of violent power floods his body. He strikes out with a perfected claw technique, tearing a bloody wound into the eagle's wing and sending it screaming. The beast falls toward the trees, and Ryan is stunned by his own evolved rank strength, especially since he only used partial power. The eagle recovers, however, launching a massive tornado at him. Ryan channels his energy into his blade and slices the dense cyclone clean in half. Julian watches in shock, realizing Ryan has achieved barrier breaking, the rare ability to shatter an enemy's aura. It is a high-level skill that few ever master, relying entirely on chance and talent. Seeing this, the proctors in the command center decide to raise the stakes, releasing 3 more evolved beasts. Ryan simply smiles and goes on the offensive, his speed now so extreme that he can briefly glide through the air. He realizes the core he consumed was speed-based, granting him the wind step skill. With this newfound agility, he weaves between the 4 evolved monsters, his claws and blade working in perfect harmony. Before long, the clearing is silent, and the beasts are no more. As the dust settles, Julian approaches to offer his thanks. Almost immediately, the proctor's eagles descend to carry them back to the original rift, where a short-haired woman awaits. She introduces herself as Captain Rain and announces that based on their performance during the Monster Tide, 8 candidates have been selected for the elite seed squad. Julian mutters in disbelief as he sees his own name on the list. Captain Rain silences the group and hands each of them a newly developed pill designed to safely stabilize their new monster cores. Captain Rain explains that their potential won't vanish, but will stack directly as the Academy provides exclusive training grounds. The group, buzzing with excitement, rushes off to begin their preparations. After training, they'll follow the standard path to higher education, choosing from the prestigious academies that invite them. Ryan, wanting to make his parents proud, decides to head home with the news. As he prepares to leave, Captain Rain calls him back, asking if he wants to represent the entire South City in the upcoming selection for the 13 Heavens. Ryan's eyes widen in complete disbelief. He asks if she's joking, wondering why a newcomer like him would be picked for such a high-stakes political selection. Unlike the Seed Squad, this is about choosing leaders to represent the city's future. It starts with observing, but eventually leads to real power, perhaps even becoming the top figure of the 13 heavens. To be honest, Ryan thinks this sounds like a dream meant only for elites. Rain smiles faintly, explaining that South City has been suppressed for too long and desperately needs a genius to prove they still exist. She asks if he is ready to be that voice for humanity. She leaves him to think it over, but the suggestion hits him like being asked to run for president on a whim. He shakes his head, deciding it's better to focus on his immediate problems first. Returning home to find his parents out, he enters the heaven-swallowing realm and approaches the king-rank beast. Suddenly, glowing lines of text begin to float before his eyes, detailing the creature's value. The Earth Tiger King's meat is tender and abundant, with every part of its body being useful for cultivation. Its liver can be refined, its bones stewed, and the resulting meal can massively boost physical stats. The monster manual, which usually acts quite dismissive of lesser beasts, seems to take this king-rank tiger very seriously. However, Ryan quickly notices that he can't afford a single one of the required spices. Left with no choice, he settles for the most primitive method, boiling the meat. But after cutting a large portion, he realizes he has no way to store the rest before this precious meat spoils. As he frets over the waste, the manual offers a deal. It will provide refrigerated storage space in exchange for half the meat. Well, giving up half is certainly better than losing it all to rot. The moment he agrees, half the tiger meat vanishes, safely tucked away into the manual's spatial storage. By then, the meat in his pot is tender, and he quickly stuffs a piece into his mouth. Suddenly, a golden halo flickers in his mind, deconstructing and reforming until he absorbs its secrets. This is the Earth Tiger's exclusive skill, and he immediately begins channeling his energy to match it. As the golden halo solidifies, he feels his energy circulation speed instantly double. In a fight, the speed at which one can mobilize their power is often the difference between life and death. This skill temporarily raises his energy limit and triples his defense, making him nearly invincible among his peers. He realizes that if a simple meal did this, the results of a full recipe would be staggering. Just then, he hears his parents return and rushes to greet them, proudly announcing himself as the Seed Squad captain. He asks for their advice on which academy to choose, looking quite pleased with himself. His father, Jacob, reaches out to feel Ryan's forehead, wondering if a fever is making the boy talk nonsense. Ryan insists it's true, telling them they can call his teacher to verify the incredible news. Seeing his serious expression, they realize he isn't joking and immediately head to the kitchen to prepare a celebratory feast. During dinner, Ryan asks his mother about the rare ingredients he needs. Since she has a cousin who studied medicine, she knows a fair bit about rare herbs like cloud mist grass. She looks at him with suspicion, asking where he heard of such a high-level material. Ryan quickly explains that his recent competition taught him a lot, claiming the cloud mist grass is part of a final test before entering the academy. His mother, Sarah, sighs and pulls a worn book from the cupboard. She tells him the book contains records of common medicinal herbs, including the very one he's looking for. Ryan wolfs down a few bites of dinner and retreats to his room to study the pages intently. He soon finds the entry, cloud mist grass, known for its detoxifying properties and found in stable rift spaces. The best location is Rift 883 near Bright City, though the herb itself has no fixed growth zone. It usually grows in valleys, often guarded by powerful beasts, a detail Ryan notes with a confident nod. After a quick goodbye to his parents the next morning, he sets off on the road toward Bright City. However, upon arriving at the Rift 883 registration desk, he is met with a frustrating surprise. Because it's a low-risk zone, it's incredibly popular, and the entry slots are fully booked for the next 7 days. Just as he's wondering what to do, a familiar voice calls out his name. It's Luna, the star of the Firebrand squad, who looks surprised to see him there. Ryan explains his predicament with a wry smile. He admits he just wanted to gain some experience in a safe rift, but didn't realize how crowded it would be. Luna turns to the middle-aged man beside her and suggests he wait outside so Ryan can take his spot. And so, under the envious gaze of the staff, Ryan enters the rift, his connections clearly paying off. Once inside, he parts ways with Luna and uses his windwalking skill to reach a valley miles away in minutes. His senses pick up the presence of several mirror-rank beasts nearby, whose blood alone is worth a small fortune. He slowly draws his long blade, knowing that higher-rank monster parts fetch an even better price. He tosses a stone to draw them out, and moments later, a spotted leopard lunges at him from the shadows. Ryan shifts his weight, narrowly dodging the beast's claws as he prepares to give it a warm welcome. He swings his blade, activating his barrier-breaking ability to instantly dissolve the leopard's gathering energy. While the creature is still stunned by the sudden loss of its power, Ryan strikes directly at its head. The leopard instinctively raises its toughest paw to block, but the blade shears through it like paper. Before it can even let out a cry of pain, the weapon finds its mark, ending the fight in a single move. The other beasts lurking in the brush begin to retreat in fear, but Ryan has no intention of letting them escape. Moving like a blur of steel, he weaves through the pack, his blade dancing with lethal precision. In a matter of moments, a dozen mirror-rank beasts lie defeated. Ryan pulls out several small vials to collect their essence blood, looking down at the pile of remains and calculating their market value. He decides not to let the meat go to waste, storing it in his spatial realm while noting that the claws and pelts are also worth quite a bit. With the area cleared, he finally begins his search for the herb. A half-meter-tall plant in the distance catches his eye, matching the description in his mother's book perfectly. But just as he reaches for his tools to harvest the cloud mist grass, a rough voice barks from behind. A group of 4 burly men approaches, mocking him for trying to snatch their prize. Dressed in heavy leather armor and bristling with weapons, they are clearly professional monster hunters. Since the government can't handle every beast alone, many graduates take up this dangerous trade to make a living. One man, his face marked by a jagged scar, looks Ryan up and down with pure contempt. He calls Ryan a naive student and tells him to leave the grass and get lost before they teach him a painful lesson. Ryan doesn't bother with words. Instead, he channels his energy and lunges forward. The scarred man tries to raise his spear in defense, but he is far too slow to match Ryan's enhanced speed. There is a sudden, thunderous crash as the two forces collide, echoing through the quiet valley. The scarred man is struck by a violent crimson light, flying backward like a kite with a broken string before slamming into a massive tree. His panicked lackeys rush to pull him down, and he collapses onto his knees. He begs for mercy, admitting they were blind to Ryan's strength and promising to leave the cloud mist grass to him. Ryan raises an eyebrow, suggesting he might let them go if they hand over everything valuable and harvest the herb for him. The leader quickly orders his men to comply, even stripping off their leather armor to appease him. Once they've fled, Ryan continues his search through the valley, and to be honest, his luck is quite remarkable. He finds 5 bundles of the herb and realizes he could transplant some into his spatial realm, ensuring he'll never run out of ingredients for his stews. He spends the next 3 hours carefully moving the plants into their new home. Just as he finishes, a sharp scream echoes through the air. Ryan leaves his spatial realm and uses his internal energy to leap high into the sky, where we see Luna being surrounded by more than a dozen attackers. The man leading the group wears a disgusting smirk, telling Luna to stop resisting and promising to treat her well if she serves him. Luna's expression darkens instantly, and with a swift movement, she decapitates one of his subordinates. She lets out a low shout, activating a secret technique that turns her blade into a blur of steel as she charges the group. The force of her attack pushes them back, and she manages to cut down 4 more men in the chaos. However, the effort clearly exhausts her, and her blade slips from her trembling hands. The leader sneers, raising his own sword high above his head, and tells her that since she refused his kindness, she can taste his ultimate strike. Seeing the danger, Ryan pushes his wind-walking speed to the limit and suddenly appears right in front of Luna. He mocks the attackers, calling them nothing but pests from the Sakura Alliance, which leaves Luna momentarily stunned by his arrival. She urgently tells him to run, fearing he can't handle so many enemies alone. Ryan just sighs and closes his eyes, jokingly asking her to let him finish his heroic entrance. After all, the Firebrand Squad's flame never goes out. The leader, feeling ignored, loses his temper and swings his blade at Ryan's head. Ryan casually reaches out with his claws and catches the weapon, which shatters with a sickening crack before he seizes the man's arm in a vice-like grip. With a surge of strength, he crushes the limb and then uses a broken blade fragment to end the man's life before he can even scream. The remaining hunters quickly pull into a defensive formation, their bravado replaced by sheer terror. Ryan gives a cold laugh, admiring their misplaced courage before deciding to see what they're truly made of. He blurs through their ranks like a ghost, and before they can even track his movements, the entire group is wiped out. As Luna recovers her strength, she thanks him for saving her life and invites him to her home so she can properly repay him. Ryan realizes that her family's influence might be exactly what he needs to find the final rare herb, Wind Thunder Root. He waves off the idea of a reward, but mentions that if she really wants to help, she could look for that specific herb. He tells her that even if she doesn't have it on hand, simply finding out where it grows would be enough. Luna agrees without a second thought, promising to have her family start the search immediately. Deciding they've spent enough time in the rift, the two of them make their way back to the exit and return to the city. It isn't long before Luna sends over several pounds of Wind Thunder Root, finally completing his recipe. Ryan is eager to get home and taste the enhanced tiger meat, remembering that his parents had mentioned a teacher was looking for him. His old mentor, Mr. Miller, is the best in the city when it comes to academy applications, so Ryan heads straight to the school office. He walks in with a smile, but Mr. Miller looks up with a face full of genuine annoyance. The teacher scolds him for being gone so long, complaining that recruiters from the top 5 academies have been pestering him nonstop. He reminds Ryan that these schools are the ultimate goal for every student, and he shouldn't be so reckless. Ryan just chuckles, telling Mr. Miller that he's the only authority he trusts and playfully asking for his help one more time. The teacher shakes his head with a weary sigh, telling the boy to stop being so cheeky and get down to business. We return to the office where Mr. Miller gets down to business, suggesting that the Vermilion Academy is Ryan's best bet. It sits in the 7th realm near a massive volcano, a true paradise for fire element users and home to the famous immortal fire ducks. He explains that the top freshman at the academy earns a chance to visit that volcano to form a contract with one of those legendary creatures. If Ryan is lucky enough to bond with a king-tier fire duck, his future will be practically set. These ducks are famous for their speed and ferocity, possessing both wind and fire attributes that make them far superior to common mounts like the black-red eagle. To be honest, having such a companion would make his upcoming trials much easier. As Ryan listens intently, Mr. Miller reveals another crucial reason for choosing this school, the chance to learn their secret needle technique. This particular style possesses a truly terrifying ability known as limb regeneration. At a high enough level, a practitioner can ignore physical limitations and regrow lost limbs directly at the wound site. Combined with the survival instincts of an immortal fire duck, Ryan would become nearly impossible to kill. A spark of excitement flashes in Ryan's eyes as he realizes that only masters of the profound or king realms could truly threaten him then. He decides right then and there that the Vermilion Academy is exactly where he belongs. Hearing this, Mr. Miller pulls a specialized blade from beneath his desk as a graduation gift, noting the 3 empty sockets for future upgrades. He then dismisses the boy, telling him he's learned enough for one day. Ryan solemnly accepts the long blade and heads home for a warm farewell with his parents before retreating into his spatial realm. There, he follows a recipe to prepare a pot of king-tier stew, filling the air with an intoxicating aroma. He devours the meal, feeling a sudden surge of immense power coursing through his veins as he tests a punch that sends nearby rocks tumbling. It seems his years of malnutrition are finally being corrected by this profound physical transformation. He can feel his physical stats skyrocketing in real time, and after finishing his meal, he finds a quiet corner of the realm to take a nap. And this is where our story takes a turn into the surreal. In his sleep, he dreams of the mysterious woman in red again, and they share an intimate moment before he suddenly jolts awake. He realizes a new technique called the Sun Moon will has been burned into his memory. This technique focuses on aerial combat, requiring 2 avian beasts to be refined and placed beneath the feet to allow for high-speed flight. Naturally, the faster one travels, the more internal energy the technique consumes. It also features a combat mode to assist the master in battle, and Ryan suspects the woman in the ice coffin is behind this gift. It's quite strange, really. Every time she appears, he seems to walk away with a massive advantage. First, he gained control over the spatial rift, and now he has been granted this advanced flight manual. He figures this technique will be perfect once he manages to capture an immortal fire duck at the academy. He resolves to master the Sun Moon Wheel before the term begins, and soon enough, the day of enrollment arrives. The academy sends several adult fire ducks to collect the 13 lucky students from Ryan City. For many, it is their first time seeing the world from such a height, and they lean over the edges to admire the passing scenery. However, just as they approach the academy grounds, their mounts suddenly drop in altitude. The ducks perform a sudden barrel roll and dive, catching the students completely off guard as they scramble to use their skills to cushion their fall. Ryan, however, simply walks down through the empty air as if on invisible stairs. As they land, a mocking voice asks which city these unlucky losers came from, laughing at their undignified entrance. A bald young man approaches with a group of followers, looking down his nose at the newcomers. The students from Ryan City are furious, but Ryan steps forward to calmly explain that the sudden dive caught them by surprise. He politely asks which city the bald man represents, trying to keep the peace. The man sneers, realizing they are from South City, a place on the verge of being kicked out of the top 13 rankings. Ryan's expression turns cold as he gives the group a very stern piece of advice. Ryan warns the group to leave immediately, or he might not be able to hold back, and things could get quite ugly. Naturally, being dismissed so easily makes the bald man's face darken as he swings a massive fist toward Ryan. But just as the punch is about to land, an angry female voice rings out, threatening to beat the man senseless if he dares to touch him. We see Sophie walking quickly toward the group, her expression promising a world of trouble. Luna is right behind her, and Ryan can't help but stare in surprise, wondering why they both decided to enroll at the Vermilion Academy. Luna simply shrugs, explaining that they followed his lead just to keep him company. Ryan turns to Sophie and asks how she knows this aggressive character, only to find out the man, Marcus, is actually a distant relative. Sophie tells him not to hold back on her account. He should deal with Marcus exactly as he deserves. Ryan rubs his chin thoughtfully and offers Marcus a choice. Since he insulted South City, they will have a proper duel. If Marcus loses, he must apologize to everyone from Ryan City for his arrogance. Marcus agrees without a second thought, while Luna whispers to Ryan that he could easily crush the man like an ant with his current strength. Ryan doesn't respond to her, preferring to handle things with a bit more ceremony. He asks the crowd to clear a space and hands his long blade to Sophie for safekeeping. Marcus lets out a roar, his muscles bulging and his skin glowing with a golden light as he activates his Vajra form. With a flick of his wrist, Ryan catches Marcus by the head and swings him through the air dozens of times before finally letting go. Marcus is left foaming at the mouth, complaining that Ryan didn't fight fair or give him a frontal confrontation. Suddenly, a sharp cry from an immortal fire duck draws everyone's attention to the sky. A massive bird spirals down, and we see a middle-aged man standing firmly on its back, noting that it seems everyone has finally arrived. He introduces himself as Mr. Dawn, a teacher at the academy, but warns the new students that formal enrollment won't be easy. To be honest, they have arrived at a rather difficult time, as the front lines of the war are currently under heavy pressure. Most students and teachers have already deployed to the front and won't return for at least 3 days. This has left the academy's defenses thin, and there is a risk that stray monsters might try to infiltrate the grounds. Mr. Dawn tasks the freshmen with guarding the academy before vanishing into the sky with his mount. The scene immediately erupts into chaos as the students realize they've been recruited as security guards instead of scholars. It seems a bit too convenient that a crisis occurred the moment they arrived, suggesting there might be more to this mission than meets the eye. Ryan, however, doesn't waste time overthinking the suspicious timing. The others follow his lead, and they soon find their way to the academy's cafeteria, where they find only a single, elderly janitor sweeping the floor. The old man sighs, lamenting that he's the only one left while everyone else is off fighting. If Ryan had any doubts before, he is now certain that this entire scenario is a carefully orchestrated test by the academy. Meanwhile, high above, Mr. Dawn watches the scene with a playful smirk on his face. He decides to spice things up by releasing 2,000 monsters toward the freshmen as an appetizer. He also sends word to the old janitor to keep Ryan occupied, as the boy's strength would make the test far too easy for the others. Back in the cafeteria, the old man suddenly drops his broom and rushes to Ryan's side. He tells the boy to stay put and remain calm, no matter what kind of commotion starts happening outside. Before Ryan can ask for an explanation, the distant roar of a monster horde echoes through the air. As the other students scramble toward the perimeter, the old man grabs Ryan by the collar and leaps onto the high wall. The old man shouts for the students to protect the city, though his exaggerated acting earns him quite a few skeptical looks. Ryan coughs awkwardly and suggests that while he won't fight, he can at least offer a bit of tactical advice. He notes that the western terrain is too complex for a direct assault, so they can focus their defenses elsewhere. He directs Luna to lead the melee fighters to the south, while Sophie coordinates the long-range attackers to support them. Unity was the top priority. Marcus, despite having just been humbled by Ryan, gritted his teeth and nodded, agreeing that they had no choice but to follow the plan. High above, Mr. Dawn frowned as he watched them. It seemed his script for a chaotic internal struggle was falling apart, so he decided to raise the stakes by releasing 10 more elite monsters. He even opened the academy's beast-attracting boxes, figuring these youngsters needed a proper trial to truly grow. Meanwhile, Ryan stood atop the highest building, using his enhanced vision to monitor the battlefield. He recognized the incoming Poison King wasps, which possessed 2 nasty traits. First, their sting caused an unbearable itch that, without special medicine, would last for weeks. The second trait was a literal nightmare for the men, as the after effects would ruin their romantic lives for half a month. Ryan immediately warned the boys to find cover while the long-range fighters took point. Sophie quickly ordered everyone to channel their energy into their weapons, but the sheer number of wasps was overwhelming. Despite their best efforts, several students were stung, and soon, the air was filled with cries of agony. The sounds of misery echoed across the grounds. Ryan looked at the old janitor and remarked that the academy's training methods were, to be honest, quite cruel. The old man simply chuckled. It took nearly an hour of desperate fighting to wipe out the wasps, but before they could even catch their breath, Mr. Dawn's 10 elite monsters began their final approach. Before Ryan could even shout a warning, Sophie and Luna leaped from the wall, their bodies seemingly suspended in midair. Sophie charged directly at a beast, screaming for it to get out of her sight. She swung her long blade, decapitating the monster in a single blow. At the same time, Luna's eyes erupted with a brilliant golden light, firing 2 concentrated beams that turned anything they touched into scorched ruin. The other students refused to be outdone, unleashing their strongest techniques against the remaining monsters. This brutal struggle lasted the entire night, and only as dawn broke did the final beast fall into a pool of its own blood. Everyone collapsed in exhaustion, which was exactly when Mr. Dawn decided to make his grand reappearance. He praised them for defending the school, noting that their courage during a crisis was certainly commendable. As a reward, he offered each student a high-grade monster core. However, those who had already reached a certain strength could instead choose a rare opportunity to enter the Fire Duck Mountain. Since most people came to the Vermilion Academy specifically for those ducks, Ryan immediately raised his hand to claim the mountain trip. He then casually asked how many ducks he was allowed to bring back. Sophie and Luna stepped to his side, making it clear they were going with him. Mr. Dawn burst into laughter, asking if Ryan truly thought catching an immortal fire duck was that simple. He explained that senior students often tried many times just to catch one, and taming them required a secret academy method involving days of sleep deprivation. Ryan, however, wasn't worried about the traditional way. While others relied on skill, Ryan had his secret dimension to store as many as he wanted. He smiled faintly, warning the teacher not to get jealous if he walked out with a whole flock. Once the rewards were distributed, Mr. Don summoned a massive adult fire duck that dove down from the clouds. He told the group to hop on, and before long, a magnificent, fortified city appeared on the horizon. Mr. Don swiped a card against the gate, and a crisp electronic voice welcomed him home, wishing the Level 2 instructor a successful journey and a swift rise in power. As the gates slowly ground open, Mr. Don's tone turned serious. He warned them that Fire Duck Mountain was a massive fragment world, populated not just by their academy, but by rival international alliances as well. Mr. Don explained that while they had an advantage, it only applied to their designated zone. A map would be provided, and while they could roam freely within its borders, crossing them was strictly forbidden. The rest, he noted, depended entirely on their own strength. With those final words, our group entered the portal, and Ryan immediately felt a dizzying sensation followed by a wave of intense, scorching heat. When his vision cleared, he found a world of crimson where even the rivers flowed like molten lava. He quickly checked his map, only to realize he had been warped 500 kilometers away from the Academy's safe zone. Even with his movement techniques at full power, it would take half a day to return. As he was weighing his options, the sound of unfamiliar chatter reached his ears, and he looked up to see 3 strangers approaching. They wore the distinct attire of the Sakura Alliance, led by a pale young man with 2 lackeys in tow. They stopped, eyeing Ryan with a look of pure arrogance, before one blonde follower gestured dismissively toward him. The man sneered, asking if Ryan was from the 13 cities and where he found the courage to wander here alone. Ryan's eyes turned cold. He had been itching for a fight ever since his last run-in with this alliance. Back at the academy, he had to hold back around his friends, but here, these fools had delivered themselves right to his doorstep. Without a word, he lashed out, his claws clamping firmly onto the blonde man's shoulder. A sickening crack echoed through the air as bone met superior force. The lackey screamed in agony, his face contorting as he begged his leader, a man called Duke, to save him from the crushing grip. Duke told him to shut up, promising his father would heal him later, but the promise came too late. In one swift motion, Ryan ended the man's life, leaving Duke splattered with blood and visibly trembling with shock. The second lackey didn't wait, drawing a Western-style blade that surged with a blood-red aura. Ryan's interest was piqued. He hadn't fully understood his own attributes yet, and here was someone using a similar power. He flicked his wrist, revealing the invisible blood threads he had been manipulating. When the trio saw the crimson lines shimmering in the air, Duke's brow furrowed in genuine confusion and suspicion. Duke demanded to know how a commoner possessed the traits of his blood clan, even suggesting Ryan might be his father's secret child. Ryan scoffed at the absurdity, retorting that his lineage was perfectly ordinary and untainted. The remaining lackey swung his blade in a rage, shouting that Ryan had insulted his master. Ryan didn't even flinch, activating his barrier break ability, which caused the enemy's blood-red energy to shatter and spiral out of control. The lackey coughed up blood as his own attack recoiled. Seizing the opening, Ryan lunged forward and crushed the man's skull with a single, brutal squeeze, leaving Duke completely alone and utterly terrified. His legs gave out, and he slumped to the ground, stammering about his father being a powerful earl in the West. He threatened that killing him would bring the wrath of an ancient family, but Ryan only chuckled at the desperate plea. It was a classic display of a spoiled heir who was fearless when protected by bodyguards, but became a trembling child the moment that protection vanished. To be honest, it was almost pathetic to watch. Ryan looked at his long blade, specifically the empty sockets meant for spirit stones, and began to wonder. He knew these gems were meant to strengthen the bond with a weapon and accelerate the flow of energy. He recalled seeing powerful masters use blood gems to control their weapons from a distance. He pulled out his map and ordered Duke to point out exactly where such rare gems could be found in this wasteland. Duke didn't hesitate, marking a precise location on the map in hopes of survival. However, the moment he looked up, Ryan's blade flashed, ending the threat permanently since they were far beyond the Academy's watchful eyes. Now, Ryan faced a choice: pursue the blood gems through dangerous, uncharted territory, or stick to the original plan of taming the fire ducks. One path offered power, while the other offered the safety of the mission. The thought of those blood gems being so close made Ryan feel a twinge of reluctance to leave. He stood there in silent contemplation for a long time before finally deciding to stick to the original plan: tame the fire ducks first, then hunt for the gems. Once his Sun Moon technique was perfected, he would be able to attack or defend as he pleased, and even escape if things turned truly dangerous. As for the 3 bodies, he didn't let them go to waste, storing them in his secret realm as fodder for his beasts. We see him set off toward the nesting grounds of the immortal fire ducks. After traveling for what felt like an eternity, he finally spotted the cave marked on his map and paused at the entrance, catching the faint, sharp scent of sulfuric lava. While such a smell was perfectly normal on Vulcan Mountain, the concentration here seemed unusually high. He told himself that since he had already come this far, he might as well see it through, come life or death. Fortune favors the bold, after all, and if things went south, he could always run. Since the rocks here were naturally infused with flame, he picked one up to use as a makeshift torch and stepped quietly into the depths of the cavern. Almost immediately, he spotted two young fire ducks huddled together, and right beside them lay a shimmering blood gem. He was overjoyed. It seemed his luck had turned, finding both his targets and the rare gem in one fell swoop. He wondered if the heavens were finally smiling on him. He knew from his studies that adult fire ducks were incredibly fierce and difficult to tame, but the young ones were a different story entirely, much easier to handle if one knew the trick. He recalled a story of a senior student who lured one away with nothing but a handful of grass. But what should he use? As he pondered this, he suddenly remembered the tiger meat he had stored away earlier. He had been curious whether monster meat was truly inedible or if his special recipes could make it safe for anyone. If it was the latter, the implications would be staggering, potentially shattering the monopoly held by the elite blood lineage families. Those who mastered such recipes would instantly become a new, untouchable class. Ryan realized this could also explain his own rapid growth, and he felt a sudden urge to kick himself for not realizing the potential of his earlier materials. If he had just thrown those 3 attackers into his secret realm, he could have tested his theories at his leisure. He told himself not to be so impulsive next time, and decided that to catch the wolf, he would have to part with some bait. He pulled out a large slab of king-class monster meat and began slicing it into small, manageable pieces to toss toward the creatures. He whispered a quiet hope that these little ones would appreciate the high-quality meal he was providing. The 2 ducklings were instantly curious, sniffing the meat before they began to eat. Ryan watched them like a hawk, waiting for any sign of a reaction, but they seemed perfectly fine. Perhaps the dosage was simply too small. He continued to slice and toss the meat, gradually closing the distance while the ducklings remained completely distracted by their feast. When he was only 3 meters away, a blood-red halo suddenly manifested behind him. 2 chains forged from golden script shot out, binding the ducklings tightly. Ryan was stunned. He had intended to use the Academy's taming method, but his Sun Moon technique had seemingly decided to act on its own accord. Then, a faint, ethereal voice whispered in his ear, calling him Lin Lang and telling him he was too slow. His heart skipped a beat. It was the woman from the ice coffin. He shouted into the void, demanding to know who she was. He asked why she kept calling him by that name, but as usual, there was no reply. He decided he would have to investigate her situation in the secret realm later, and for now, he turned his attention back to the 2 bound ducklings. He tentatively channeled his technique, and the golden chains vanished instantly. The 2 ducklings rushed to his feet, transforming into swirling streaks of gold and red flame. After a brief hesitation, he gave the order to set off. The moment he spoke, a massive surge of power erupted from beneath his feet. He was thrown back by the sudden momentum as the world around him blurred into a tunnel of light, and before he knew it, he was standing safely outside the cave. With this kind of speed, he felt as though the entire world was within his reach. He tried to push for even more speed, but a faint, exhausted chirping from below stopped him. He realized, with a bit of a smile, that the little guys were still just babies. They simply couldn't keep up, as babies lack the stamina for high-intensity flight. Suddenly remembering the blood gem, Ryan hurried back into the cave, retrieved the prize, and then he slotted it into the pre-cut groove on his long blade. The weapon immediately pulsed with a faint red glow, but as he turned to leave, a violent, oppressive aura filled the air. It was a familiar, terrifying pressure, much like the king-class tiger he'd faced. Then, a calm voice called out, "I am Professor Miller from the Vermilion Academy. If you're a student, come out now." The voice continued, "I know you have the fire ducklings, but those are the king's offspring. Don't worry, the Academy won't let you lose out. Come talk, or we're coming in." Hearing it was someone from the Academy, Ryan nearly wept with relief. He knew he couldn't defeat a king-class beast alone, so at least his life was safe for now. He looked at the ducklings, noting their parents had arrived, and stepped out to see a massive, furious fire duck king standing beside a refined-looking man. Ryan introduced himself as a freshman, and Professor Miller pulled him back, explaining to the king that it was all a misunderstanding. The king then called for his children to return. 3 minutes passed, yet the ducklings ignored him, heads down as they searched the ground for more meat. Miller looked at the king and asked, quite bluntly, if they were actually his. The king turned red with shame and fury, shouting at his children to come back before the outsider turned them into pawns. Miller just laughed, calling the little ones geniuses. Miller told the king that if the children refused to leave, they would simply become Academy beasts. He then turned to Ryan, impressed that the boy had literally bribed them away with food. The fire duck king eventually stormed off in a huff, disowning the pair. Once he was gone, Miller patted Ryan's shoulder and told him to find him in Building C for growth materials. With a flash, the professor vanished. Soon, the trial ended and the freshmen were teleported back to the academy. Ryan's first move was to find a quiet corner and enter his secret realm. We see him return to the ice coffin and the mysterious woman in red. He introduced himself as Ryan, asking about the strange talismans that had covered her when they first met. He asked for her story and why she called him Lin Lang. A familiar voice replied, explaining that he had freed her from her captors and the seal that bound her there. She claimed she had sworn to belong to whoever broke the seal. However, Ryan noticed her lips hadn't moved at all. Panicked, he wondered who on earth he was actually talking to. He told the void to stop messing with him, noting that while his family ran a crematorium, they only dealt with beasts. Giving up for now, he stepped away from the coffin area. The ducklings immediately nuzzled his legs, and with a faint smile, he realized they were hungry again. He tossed them a large slab of monster meat, which they devoured instantly. Suddenly, the ducklings erupted in red light, their bodies doubling in size before his very eyes. Their presence grew heavy, and Ryan could smell the shift in their internal energy. They had actually broken through to the profound realm. He mused that while they were 5-second wonders before, they should be much stronger now, so he began the sun-moon incantation. The ducklings transformed into 2 blazing wheels of fire beneath his feet. With an excited shout, he urged them forward to test their new power, and they took off with a thunderous crack. The wheels of fire beneath Ryan's feet suddenly surged, propelling him straight toward the sky. He spent a full hour weaving through the clouds, and seeing the ducklings still full of energy, he chuckled to himself. He had plenty of monster meat, and even if he ran out, his secret realm was teeming with beasts ready for harvest. With such resources, he knew their growth into kings was inevitable as he patted them contentedly. He decided to name the pair the Sun-Moon Wheels, and the royal hatchlings nodded in understanding. After a hearty meal together, they set off for Building C to find Professor Miller as promised. Arriving at the office, Ryan knocked softly and entered to claim his supplies. Miller looked up and handed him a card, explaining that it held his monthly allowance which he could collect from logistics. The professor noted he hadn't misjudged Ryan's potential, telling him to bring the ducklings along as they were vital for survival in the outer prison. Ryan agreed, quickly returning to the building entrance with his pets. When Miller saw the 2 ducklings again, he was visibly shocked that they had reached the profound realm in a single day. He remarked that Ryan might actually keep up with his pace, prompting Ryan to summon the wheels. With a flash, the ducklings transformed into flaming wheels beneath Ryan's feet once more. He maneuvered with slight shifts of his weight, following closely behind Miller as they flew for over 20 minutes. As they reached the assembly point for the outer prison, Miller shouted for Ryan to jump onto his own mount, noting the wheels were far too flashy. Ryan leaped over, and Miller introduced him to the waiting group. He presented Ryan as their junior, here simply to gain some experience. This introduction immediately sparked a wave of hostility from the others before the Vermilion Academy students could even speak. The onlookers mocked him, wondering who he had offended to be sent here. Ryan wasn't about to let the trash comment slide, so he drew his long blade and demanded to know which dog was barking. A young man with blonde curls named Marcus stepped forward with a cold sneer. He mocked Ryan's courage for speaking to them that way, which immediately provoked the senior students from the Vermilion Academy. A senior warned Marcus that if he was looking for a fight, he should pick someone his own size rather than bullying a freshman. Ryan felt a surge of warmth, realizing he had truly chosen the right academy. He signaled for his seniors to stay calm and, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, let out a sharp whistle. A moment later, 2 spheres of intense heat arrived, and Ryan was suddenly hovering 30 feet in the air. He challenged Marcus directly, telling him to stop barking and show some real strength. Beside them, Miller cursed under his breath, calling Ryan a little rascal for failing to stay low profile. The professor had warned him to keep the Sun-Moon Wheels a secret, yet Ryan had exposed them in less than 3 minutes. Still, Miller gave a resigned nod, and Ryan let his full aura explode. A golden halo manifested behind him, making him look like a god of war descended to the mortal realm. He leveled his blade at his opponent, and as he spoke, a piercing beam of light erupted from Marcus's eyes. Marcus's companions shouted for him to just teach the boy a lesson without killing him. Ryan simply smirked, raising his blade high to strike directly at Marcus's head while activating his breaker ability. The brilliant beam of light began to dissolve before everyone's eyes. Marcus cried out in disbelief, unable to comprehend how his divine power, the very foundation of the Western belief system, could be broken. Their power relied on the strength of their conviction, and for a moment, Marcus's faith wavered. He quickly recovered, however, roaring that his god was supreme as he summoned a true pillar of light. The clear sky turned blindingly bright as a massive column of energy descended toward Ryan. With a slight tilt of his flaming wheels, Ryan shifted several meters through the air, dodging the strike with ease. After dodging the pillar of light, Ryan swung his blade to release a blood-red flash, while the Sun-Moon Wheels provided a powerful surge of momentum. In that exact moment, he felt the unmistakable sensation of a breakthrough, and his 2 crimson claws became even more responsive, moving with terrifying speed.